Dear students, there are 5 units in first PU biology. Out of that 5 units, there is an unit. It is the animal physiology. Animal physiology. So in the last class, I explained about the different branches of biology. For example, morphology, studying of the external characters of an organism. Like that, physiology, studying of the different biochemical functions occurs inside the living body. Physiology. So physiology is a branch of biology, deals with the studying of different biochemical, or you can say biological functions of the living organism. So there is an unit, it is called as the animal physiology, under which there are different chapters are there. Out of that, in this class, let us study the respiration and exchange of gases. Okay. So respiration is one of the biochemical, or you can say biological functions occurs in all the living organisms body. Okay. What is respiration? Simply we can say that exchange of air between the atmosphere and the living body. Respiration. Okay. That respiration concerned with the man occurs in 3 or 4 steps. The first step is the breathing. First step is the breathing. Second step is the external respiration. External respiration. Third one is the transportation of the gases. Transportation of gases. Okay, in the blood. Then fourth one is the internal respiration. Internal respiration. And the last one is the cellular respiration. So these are the different steps present in the respiration in most of the living organisms, but we are talking about the respiration in man. Okay, come to these different steps. Breathing. Then what is breathing? Exchange of gases between the atmosphere and the lungs is called breathing. And that breathing consisting of 2 sub-steps. One is the inspiration, and another one is the expiration. Right? This inspiration is also called as the inhalation. Like that, this expiration is also called as the exhalation. Right? Inspiration, inhalation. Expiration, exhalation. Both inspiration and expiration constitute the breathing. Right? Actually, that breathing is also called as the ventilation. That breathing is also called as the ventilation. Right? Then what is inspiration? The process of intaking of the fresh air from the atmosphere into the lungs is called inspiration. Once again I will repeat. The process of intaking of the fresh air. Remember that, fresh air from the atmosphere into the lungs. It is not just intaking of the oxygen. We cannot intake the single oxygen because this air is a mixture of different gases. We cannot separate that different gases. We cannot separate the oxygen only to inspire. So, inspiration means the process of intaking of the fresh air from the atmosphere into the lungs. Then what is that fresh air? The air with more oxygen. Fresh air. Of course, in that air, we can see the presence of CO2 also, nitrogen also. Okay? Fresh air with more oxygen. right? Expiration, the process of removal of the foul air, the process of removal of the foul air from the lungs to outside. Okay, it is called expiration. Foul air is one in which there is more concentration of CO2. So air with more CO2 can be called as the foul air. Air with more oxygen can be called as the fresh air. Right? So exchange of the gases between the atmosphere and the lungs can be called as the breathing or ventilation. That breathing consisting of two sub-steps, as I told you, inspiration, expiration. Right? The process of intaking of the fresh air from the atmosphere into the lungs, inspiration or inhalation. The process of removal of the foul air, okay, from the lungs to outside is called as the expiration or exhalation. Okay, so breathing. Then external respiration, exchange of gases between the lungs and the blood. I will repeat, exchange of gases between the lungs and the blood is called external respiration. In that external respiration, oxygen will be diffused into the blood. CO2 will be diffused from the blood into the lungs. This is the exchange of gases. Exchange of gases between the lungs and the blood is called external respiration. In that particular step, there is the diffusion of the oxygen from the lungs, from the alveoli of the lungs, okay, from the lungs into the blood, right? Diffusion of the carbon dioxide from the lungs to the lungs is called, totally it is called external respiration, okay? Then transportation of the gases in the blood. You see, in the blood, O2 will be transported from the lungs to the body tissues, mainly in the form of oxyhemoglobin. In the blood, oxygen will be transported from the lungs to the body tissue, mainly in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Oxyhemoglobin is a mixture of, is a combination of oxygen and hemoglobin, right? Then at the same time, there is the transportation of the carbon dioxide from the tissue to the lungs through that blood in different forms. I will tell you that later, okay? This is external respiration and transportation of gases. Internal respiration, exchange of gases between the blood and the body tissue, right? Exchange of gases between the blood and the body tissue. In this particular step, oxygen will be diffused from the blood into the cell. At the same time, the carbon dioxide from the body tissue into the blood. So this exchange of gases between the blood and the body tissue is called internal respiration, right? Ultimately, inside the cell, last step of respiration occurs. It is called cellular respiration. Respiration occurs inside the cell, cellular respiration. So these are the different steps present in respiration in man and almost in all the advanced animals, right? But we are talking about the respiration in man. In man, for respiration, there is a system. That system can be called as the respiratory system, okay? Respiratory system. In man, that respiratory system consisting of these different parts, okay? Number one, a pair of nostrils. A pair of nostrils. There is a pharynx. There is a pharynx. There is a larynx. Larynx. There is a trachea, also called as the windpipe. Okay? trachea. There are bronchi. Okay. There are lungs. There is a diaphragm. These are the different parts present in the respiratory system of man, right? In man, the respiratory system consisting of a pair of nostrils, okay? A pair of nostrils. It is the anterior part of the respiratory system, right? And both that nostrils are separated by means of the septum, and that nostrils having two pairs of openings, a pair of external openings, external nares, a pair of internal openings, internal nares, right? And that nostrils are lined with the mucous membrane, where that mucus is produced, where the cilia are present. That entire structure can be called as the nose. And that nose, or you can say that nostrils, performing three functions concerned with the respiration. The three functions are: number one, warming; number two, cooling; number three, filtration. These are the three functions performed by that nose or the parts of the nose. When the intaking air is very cool, these nostrils, by releasing the heat, they warm the air. If the intaking air is very hot, then in that condition, that nostrils release some moisture, cooling the air. At the same time, with the help of the mucus and cilia, if there is any dust particles present in the air, that will be filtered. So, filtration of air, cooling of air, and warming of air occur in the nostrils. Okay, first part of the respiratory system. And that nostrils lead into the pharynx. This pharynx is a common passage for the entry of both food and air. Right, food and air. And this pharynx concerned with the respiration leads into larynx. Okay, for example, this is a larynx, this is a trachea, for example, this is the larynx. Larynx is also called as the voice box. It is also called as the sound box because it produces the sound. Okay, and this larynx having an opening, it is called as the glottis. And that glottis is covered over by a lid. This is called epiglottis. Lid name. During swallowing the food, this epiglottis closes this glottis to avoid the entry of any food particles into this respiratory system, into this trachea. So this is the main role of this epiglottis. It closes the nostrils during swallowing the food, okay, from the buccal cavity into the esophagus, right? So this larynx, also called as the voice box because it produces the voice, it produces sound. It can produce the sound because of presence of the thread-like, cord-like structures in the larynx, and that cord-like structures are called as the vocal cords. Seaboard cord, thread-like. Vocal cords. When the air is passed over that vocal cords, sound is produced. That's how that larynx can produce the sound. Okay, so it is also called as the voice box. From the larynx, a tube-like structure is extended downwards. Okay, this is called trachea. Trachea. It's also called as the windpipe. It's also called as the windpipe. Actually, this trachea is extended from the pharynx up to half of the thoracic cavity. Half of thoracic cavity. Then it divides into two branches. Okay, and this trachea is in touch with the esophagus always. Okay, for example, if you open this part, here is a bone. It is called as the breastbone. If you open that breastbone, you can see this trachea, windpipe. Just behind that, you can see the esophagus. During swallowing the food in the esophagus, there is a chance of applying of the pressure over this trachea. It's a very delicate part. There is a chance of breaking off, collapsing of the trachea. To avoid the collapsing of that trachea, this trachea having about 16 to 20 different types of C-shaped cartilaginous rings. For example, this is one cartilaginous ring, another, like that. Throughout the length of the trachea, we can see about 16 to 20 such C-shaped cartilaginous rings. That C-shaped cartilaginous rings prevent the collapsing of the trachea during swallowing the food. Right? Then that trachea divides into two branches. And these two branches can be called as the primary bronchus. Primary bronchi, plural. Okay? This one primary bronchus, this another primary bronchus. And that primary bronchus enters into the lung of that side. For example, you see this is the lung of this side. Okay? This is the lung of this side. Then after the entry into the lung, that primary bronchus divides into branches, secondary bronchi. Each secondary bronchus divides into branches, tertiary, quaternary, like that. Ultimately, at the end of these branches, we can see the grape-like structures inside the lung. These grape-like structures can be called as the alveoli. Alveoli are the structural and functional units of the lung. Actually, exchange of gases occurs between the alveoli and the blood. I will tell you that later. Okay? So, this is one lung, this is another lung. Usually, the left lung having two chambers, right lung having three chambers like this. It is having two chambers like this because of presence of heart in this empty space. The space present in the thoracic cavity between two lungs, this empty space is called as the diasternum. Diasternum is an empty space between two lungs in the thoracic cage, thoracic cavity, okay, where actually this heart is located. Actually in man, this heart is slightly towards left side. It is in touch with this left lung. It is slightly above the level of this right side lung, like this. You see now, this is the right lung, slightly below the level of this left lung. It is slightly above the level of this because of the presence of this heart. It is in touch with that left lung. Okay, so this empty space is called as the diasternum, in which that heart is located. Right? Then each lung is covered over by the covering. For example, this is the covering of the lung. This is the covering of the lung. The covering of the lung is called as the pleura. Covering of the lung is called as the pleura. You see, all the vital organs in the body usually covered over by the protective covering. So, lungs also vital organs. So, each lung is covered over by the covering. It is called as the pleura. In heart also, there is a covering. It is called the pericardium. I will tell you that later. Okay. So, this is pleura. Then, ultimately, just below these lungs, there is a transversely located muscular structure. This is the transversely transversely arranged muscular structure, it is called as the diaphragm. So diaphragm is a transverse muscular structure which separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. Not only that, during respiration, especially during the mechanism of ventilation, it is playing a very important role. I will tell you that later. Okay. This is the brief information about the structure of the respiratory system in man. Okay. These are the important parts. Right? I will rub this. So I told you there are different steps are there. The first step is the ventilation or breathing. Breathing is nothing but exchange of the gases between the atmosphere and the lungs, where the fresh air will be entered into the lungs, foul air will be removed out of the lungs. Okay. During that breathing, there is a mechanism. Okay. So mechanism of breathing. What is that mechanism of breathing? Mechanism of breathing. You know that this thoracic cage is covered over by the ribs in the anterior region. Okay. That ribs are present. Backbone is there. Between the backbones and ribs, different bones, cartilages are there. Here, I told you, there is a bone. It is called as the sternum or breastbone. From that breastbone, these are the ribs extended. Right? And that are extended between this thoracic bone or breastbone and that backbone. So a cage is there. It is called as the thoracic cage, where the lungs are located. So there is a mechanism during inspiration and during expiration. What is the mechanism during inspiration? Mechanism during inspiration. Look here. During inspiration, there is the outward and upward movement of the ribs. During inspiration, there is a mechanism. What is that mechanism? During inspiration, there is the outward and upward movement of the ribs due to the contractions of the external intercostal muscles, relaxation of the internal intercostal muscles. You see, if these are the ribs, between the ribs, muscles are there. The muscles present here in the outside can be called the external intercostal muscles. External intercostal muscles. The muscles present between the ribs, can be called as the intercostal muscles. Okay, that intercostal muscles present on the outside can be called as the external intercostal muscles. And these muscles present inside can be called as the internal intercostal muscles. Right? Now, during inspiration, there is the outward and upward movement of the ribs due to contractions of the external intercostal muscles and the relaxation of the internal intercostal muscles. This is one of the mechanisms, processes. At the same time, there is the, for example, this is a trachea, these are the branches, these are the two lungs, this is a diaphragm. Actually, the diaphragm present here like this before inspiration. During inspiration, this dome-shaped diaphragm lowers and flattens. So there is the lowering, there is the lowering and flattening of the diaphragm. There is the lowering and flattening of the diaphragm. So because of the expansion of the ribs, because of the lowering of the diaphragm, the thoracic cage area is increased. Thoracic cage area is increased. Because of that, the internal pulmonary pressure, the pressure present inside the lungs can be called as the pulmonary pressure. The pulmonary pressure will be decreased. Pulmonary pressure will be decreased. Because of this, there is a rushing of the entry of the air from the atmosphere into the lungs. This is the mechanism occurs during inspiration. There are three important events during inspiration. Number one, outward and upward movement of the ribs due to contraction of the external intercostal muscles and relaxation of the internal intercostal muscles. Second event, there is a lowering and flattening of the diaphragm. Okay, because of these two, area of the thoracic cage is increased. In turn, because of that, the internal intrapulmonary pressure will be decreased. Intrapulmonary pressure, the pressure present inside the lungs, can be called as the intrapulmonary pressure. It is decreased. Because of that, the air is rushed from the atmosphere into the lungs. This is the mechanism of inspiration. Right? Mechanism of inspiration. Mechanism of expiration, the entire process will be opposite. During expiration, during the mechanism of expiration, there is the inward and downward movement of the ribs. Inward and downward movement of the ribs because of relaxation of the external intercostal muscles and contractions of the internal intercostal muscles. Don't be confused. During expiration, there is the downward and inward movement of the ribs due to relaxation of the external intercostal muscles and contractions of the internal intercostal muscles. I hope you have understood. Due to relaxation and contraction of these intercostal muscles, there is a downward and inward movement of the ribs. And that downward and inward ribs apply the pressure over the lungs. Meanwhile, there is the dome shaping of this diaphragm. There is the dome shaping of this diaphragm. Like this. It will become like this. Now this diaphragm pushing that lungs upward. These ribs apply the pressure over the lungs. Because of that, intrapulmonary pressure will be increased than the atmospheric pressure. So during expiration, intrapulmonary pressure will be increased because of these two. Ultimately, the air present inside the lungs will be rushed out. This is the mechanism of expiration. Right? I hope all of you have understood the mechanisms clearly. Mechanism during expiration, mechanism during inspiration. Right? Then, now, at this moment, more oxygen is present in the lungs. Right? When compared to the carbon dioxide concentration. Now, that oxygen will be transported into the body tissue, mainly in the form of oxyhemoglobin. When the oxygen is entered into the lungs, into the blood from the lungs, that oxygen combines with the hemoglobin. This hemoglobin combines with oxygen, it will become oxyhemoglobin, HbO2. This is oxyhemoglobin. Hemoglobin. So, in the blood, that oxygen is transported in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Near the body tissues, because of the variation in the hydrogen concentration, this oxyhemoglobin will be dissociated into oxygen and hemoglobin. So, thus separated oxygen will be diffused into the body tissue. That's how this oxygen will be transported from the atmosphere ultimately into the body cells, into the body tissue. So, the route of O2 transportation is atmosphere, then lungs, or you can say alveoli, from the lungs into the blood, from the blood into body tissues. This is the route of O2 transportation, right? So, majority of the, about more than 90% of the oxygen will be transported in the blood in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Only a small percentage of O2 is transported in the dissolved form in the plasma. This is the O2 transportation information in brief. Okay, I will explain this in detail while conducting the class. Okay, like that, transportation of carbon dioxide, the route of CO2 transportation is just opposite to the route of the O2 transportation. Carbon dioxide will be transported from the body tissues, into the blood, right? From the blood into alveoli, or you can say lungs, from the lungs into the atmosphere. So this is the route of CO2 transportation, right? You see, CO2 will be transported in the blood by different means. About 70% of carbon dioxide is transported in the blood in the form of carbonic acid, H2CO3. That too, it is transported through the water present in the RBC. I will clear it once again. About 70% of carbon dioxide, more than 70% of carbon dioxide is transported in the blood with or by the water present in RBC. By the water present in RBC. Remember that. Not in the plasma, not in the WBC, platelets, etc. Remember that. Okay. So, more than 70% of the carbon dioxide is transported by the water present in RBC in the form of carbonic acid. Remember that. Okay. Then, about 7% of carbon dioxide is transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. Carbaminohemoglobin, where the carbon dioxide combines with this hemoglobin, HbCO2. This is the carbaminohemoglobin. About 7% of carbon dioxide is transported, okay, by this hemoglobin in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. More than 70% by means of water present in RBC. The remaining small percentage is transported through the plasma in the dissolved form, right? Leaving this, okay, you see, usually the reaction between the water and the carbon dioxide, and water, remember that this water is present in the RBC of the blood. Anyway, wherever it is, usually the reaction between these two is very, very slow. Very, very slow in the absence of enzyme. You see, according to one calculation, in the absence of enzyme, the reaction between these two compounds is very slow. Very slow means, for example, about 200 such H2CO3 carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is formed due to the reaction between these two, carbon dioxide and water. Okay, between these two, reaction is very slow. Very slow means only about 200 such carbonic acids are formed in the absence of enzyme. It is such a very, very slow reaction between the carbon dioxide and water. But in RBC, there is an enzyme. That enzyme is the carbonic anhydrase. In presence of this carbonic anhydrase, the reaction between the carbon dioxide and water is very fast. Very fast means how much? Actually, per second. Per second, remember that. Here, per hour, 200 molecules. Here, per second, about 6 lakhs of carbonic acid compounds are formed. You can imagine the role of the enzyme during any biochemical reactions. In this particular case, this enzyme, carbonic anhydrase, can speed up the reaction between these two. Per second, about 6 lakhs of carbonic acid compounds are formed. So that's how, in the form of carbonic acid, that carbon dioxide is mainly transported from the body tissue into the lungs through the blood. Near the vicinity of the alveoli, because of the variation in the hydrogen molecule, hydrogen ion concentration, again this carbonic acid will be dissociated into carbon dioxide and water. So this carbon dioxide ultimately released out of the lungs. Okay, this is expiration. This is the brief information about the transportation of gases, particularly transportation of the oxygen and transportation of the carbon dioxide. Right? Okay. Then, in that chapter, you might have studied in your previous class volumes of air. There are different volumes of air. Now I will explain some of the volumes, not all, some of them. Okay? Then remainings will be explained in detail. Okay? Directly. These are the different volumes of air. For example, tidal volume. Tidal volume. Tidal volume. TB. Inspiratory reserve volume. Inspiratory reserve volume, IRV. Expiratory reserve volume, ERV. Vital capacity, VC. Like that, still 2 or 3 different volumes are there. Okay, I will explain that later. Tidal volume. What is a tidal volume or TB? You see, the amount of air, the volume of air which is inspired or expired by a person during resting condition. Remember that. Tidal volume, the volume of air, the amount of air inspired or expired by a person during resting condition. This is important. During resting condition is called tidal volume. How much? This is about 500 ml. The tidal volume is about 500 ml. Okay, average. Then what is this inspiratory reserve volume? Inspiratory reserve volume, as the name indicates, the volume of air inspired by a person. Look here, the volume of air inspired by a person. Extra volume of air actually it is. The extra volume of air inspired by a person in addition to the tidal volume is called inspiratory reserve volume or IRV. The extra amount of air, extra volume of air inspired by a person in addition to, remember that, in addition to the tidal volume. How much it is? It depends. It depends upon the nature of work he is doing. He may be running very fastly, he is swimming, cycling, like that. It all depends upon the vigorosity of the work he is doing. Okay? Extra. It may be about 2000 ml of air, 2,500 ml of air, 1.5 thousand ml of air. Anyway, that will be more than the tidal volume. Okay, that extra volume is depending upon the type of work he is doing. Right? This is the inspiratory reserve volume. Like that, expiratory reserve volume, as the name indicates, it is the extra volume of air expired by a person. Extra volume of air expired by a person in addition to tidal volume during working condition is called expiratory reserve volume. For example, if the IRV is about 2000 ml of air, this ERV means expiratory reserve volume, may be 1.5 thousand ml of air. ERV will be always lesser than IRV. Remember that. ERV will also be lesser than that of IRV. So, according to here, this may be 1.5 thousand ml of air. So, this is expiratory reserve volume, the extra volume of air expired by a person in addition to tidal volume. Okay? Vital capacity, the sum total of all these three, tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume and expiratory reserve volume, the sum total of all the three can be called as the vital capacity. For example, according to the volumes given here, 500, 2000, 2500, 1.5 thousand, total it is 4000 ml of air. Vital capacity is the sum total of all the tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume and expiratory reserve volume. Okay, it is like that. Then one more volume is there, it is the residual volume. Residual volume, RV. Then what is that residual volume? The small amount of air, not oxygen, remember that. The small amount of air retained in the lungs even after the expiration. Even after the expiration, some amount of air is retained in the lungs. That retained small amount of air even after the expiration can be called as the residual volume. So that what is the meaning of residual volume? The small amount of air retained in the lungs even after the expiration is called residual volume. Remember that these lungs will not be completely empty at any time, will not be completely filled at any time. Both of them are dangerous. So that these lungs will not be completely filled from here to here. There will be some gap at the top. Like that, these lungs will not be completely empty. If there is any empty, completely, if the lungs are empty, that leads into death. That's why some amount of air is retained in the lungs. Okay? So this is the residual volume. So this is the brief information about the respiration and exchange of gases concerned with the human beings. Okay? Concerned with the respiration also, there are some disorders are there. For example, asthma, bronchitis, like that, emphysema. Okay? Asthma, for example, asthma, bronchitis, okay, emphysema, like that. There are different disorders concerned with the respiratory system. I will explain that later during conducting class directly. Okay. So this is the brief information. Students, I hope all of you have understood after hearing this class, after observing the entire class. If you have any doubt in between, remember that you can make it, you can get the clearance. Please ask me. Okay, I will give you the phone number. To that phone number, you can give me a call and get clarification. Okay, but I hope all of you have understood clearly. Students, I told you There are different biochemical functions, or you can say biological functions present in the living body. Concerned with a man, I will explain one more biochemical reaction or biological function. It is the excretion. You can go through along with this respiration chapter. Okay, I will brief it. I will brief that. Then you can ask if you have any doubt. Okay. Then what is the excretion? You see, the process of removal of nitrogenous wastes out of the body can be called as excretion. There are varieties of excretory materials are produced in our body. For example, carbon dioxide is also a excretory product. Even the sweat is also like that. Varieties of excretory products are produced due to metabolic activities. But concerned with excretion, we can define the term excretion. As I told you, the process of removal of nitrogenous wastes out of the body can be called as the excretion. Then what are those nitrogenous wastes? How they are produced? And that nitrogenous wastes are produced during the protein metabolism. Remember that, okay? So, due to or during the protein metabolism, these are the nitrogenous wastes produced. Number 1, ammonia. Ammonia. Number 2, urea. Number 3, uric acid. These are the different types of nitrogenous wastes which are produced in our body. Okay? Ammonia, out of these 3, ammonia is most poisonous. So that should be excreted as and when. As soon as they are produced, they should be removed out of the body. Otherwise, they will become very toxic to the body. So this is most toxic. Urea is less toxic. That can be retained in the body for some hours. Uric acid is the least toxic. That can be retained for a long time in the body. Okay? This is most toxic. This is a less toxic. This is a least toxic. Okay? To remove that ammonia, large amount of water is necessary around the body of that organism. Okay? To remove the urea, some amount of water, okay? Some amount of water is enough to remove that urea. Very little amount of water is enough to remove this uric acid. And usually this uric acid is removed in the form of pellets. In the solid form, in the form of small pellet with a very small amount of water, right? So, based on the type of excretory products excreted by the animals, that animals are classified into 3 types. That types of animals are, number 1, ammonotelic animals. Ammonotelic animals or ammonotelics. Second one is the ureotelic animals or ureotelics. Third one is the uricotelic animals or uricotelics. So based on the type of excretory product they excrete, animals are classified into ammonotelic animals, ureotelic animals and uricotelic animals. Okay? So you know the meaning of this. Ammonotelic animals, those animals which excrete ammonia as their nitrogenous waste are called as the ammonotelic animals. Right? Example, most of the aquatic animals like fishes, most of the fishes, not all, around the body of the fishes, large amount of water is present. I told you, to excrete this ammonia, there should be large amount of water around the body of that animal. So usually the fishes are having large amount of water around their body. so that easily they can excrete. Okay? Like that, those animals which excrete the urea, those animals which excrete the urea as their nitrogenous waste are called as the ureotelic animals. Ureotelic animals. Okay? Example, mammals. All the mammals including man. Right? All the mammals including man. Adult amphibia. Some of the reptiles. Remember that. Okay? Ureotelic animals. Here, in addition to some fishes, even the tadpole larva of frog, ammonotelic. Right? Uricotelic animals. Those animals which excrete the uric acid. Those animals which can excrete the uric acid as their nitrogenous waste can be called as the uricotelic animals. Best example, birds. All the birds are uricotelic animals. They excrete the uric acid in the form of thin paste. Right? Some of the insects also uricotelics. Some of the reptiles also uricotelics. Okay? So, based on the nature of excretory product, that animals are classified into these different types. Ammonotelic animals, ureotelic animals and uricotelic animals. Right? Come to the excretion and excretory system in man. Okay? In man, the excretory system consisting of these different parts. A pair of kidneys. A pair of kidneys. Right? A pair of ureters. A single urinary bladder. Urinary bladder. A single urethra. These are the different parts, main parts present in the excretory system of man. Okay. For example, these are the two kidneys present there. A pair of kidney, you see, this is one kidney. This is another kidney. And these two kidneys are present, one on either side of the vertebral column in the abdominal region. In the abdominal region, on the back side, one on either side of that backbone, these two kidneys are present. So here we can see the presence of that vertebral column. So there is a pair of kidneys in the abdomen. They are present, one on either side of the vertebral column. Right? From each kidney, a tube is extended downwards. Like this. These two tubes are called as the ureters. These two are the kidneys. Right? These two are the ureters. And these two tubes, ureters, are ending in a bag-like structure. This is the urinary bladder. Urinary bladder. Right? From this urinary bladder, a small tube is extended outwards. This is urethra. This is the morphology of the excretory system. Okay? Right. Come to the studying of the section of each kidney. Okay? Each kidney. When we take the section of each kidney, it appears like this. This is the section of the LS of the kidney, so that we can get the same shape. This kidney externally covered over by a covering. This is the covering of the kidney. This is the covering of the kidney. It is called a renal capsule. Covering of the kidney is called renal capsule. Covering of the lungs, pleura. Covering of the heart, pericardium. Like that. Okay. So, covering of the kidney is called a renal capsule. Right. Then the inner portion of the kidney can be differentiated into peripheral. This is the peripheral part. This is the peripheral part. Peripheral cortex and inner medulla. The inner portion of the kidney can be divisible into peripheral cortex and inner medulla. Right. Here in this cortex, about 1 million of microscopic tubules are embedded. Okay, they are called nephrons. Nephrons are the structural and functional unit of the kidney. Urinary tubules, you can say, they can be called as the urinary tubules, or popularly called as the nephrons. Nephrons are the structural and functional units of the kidney, right? And inside that medullary region, we can see many pyramid-like structure, like this, pyramid-like structure. These pyramid-like structures are called as the renal pyramids. Renal pyramids. I will tell you what is that. Right. The base of renal pyramid can be called, this is the base, this is the base, this is base, this is base, this is base, this is base. The base of the renal pyramid can be called as the renal calyx. Renal calyx. There are so many renal calci. Okay. And ultimately, all of them lead into a large cavity. It is called as the renal pelvis. The depression is called renal pelvis, from where that tube, this tube, ureter, is extended. This is renal pelvis. Okay, from that a tube is extended downwards. It is called as the ureter, or can say just ureter. Okay, actually into the kidney a blood vessel is entered. This is the blood vessel entering. This is a renal artery. This is renal artery. A blood vessel is coming out. This can be called as the renal vein. Renal vein. Okay. Then I told you this entire inner portion is embedded, deposited with microscopic tubules called as the nephrons. For example, this is one nephron. For sample, you have to write one example. Okay. For example, this is one nephron. Rough sketch. This is one nephron. This one nephron. Like this, this entire inner portion is embedded with these nephrons. I told you these nephrons are the structural and functional units of the kidney. If the question is asked, draw the LS of longitudinal section of a kidney. If the question is so, you have to draw this figure. This is the LS of the human kidney. And these are the different parts for 3 marks. Okay. You have to write at least 6 correct labels. Each correct label attracts half a mark. This is the rule of evaluation. Each correct label, not label, each correct label attracts half a mark. So that there should be at least 6 labels, correct 6 labels. Okay. Right. So this is LS of the kidney. Okay. Come to the structure of the nephron. Structure of nephron or urinary tubule. A nephron, I told you the definition of that nephron. Nephrons are the structural and functional units of the kidney. And also I told there is a million of, about 10 lakhs of such urinary tubules are present in a single kidney. It is thickly deposited. When we take the structure of each nephron, these are the different parts. The nephron consisting of the first part is a Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule. glomerulus. Okay, Bowman's capsule and glomerulus is one part, another part. Then there is a proximal convoluted tubule, PCT, proximal convoluted tubule. There is a Henle's loop. There is a distal convoluted tubule, DCT. There is a collecting tubule, CT. These are the different parts of a nephron. Okay, let us study these Bowman's capsule, glomerulus, proximal convoluted, Henle's loop, distal convoluted, and collecting tubule. Okay. For 5 marks, question will be asked, draw a neat label diagram of a structure of a nephron. Right. This is the first part of the nephron. For example, Bowman's capsule. This is the Bowman's capsule. This is Bowman's capsule. It's a cup-like structure. It's the anterior part of the nephron. It's a cup-like structure with 2 walls. So, Bowman's capsule is a double-walled cup-like structure. Right? Inside that cup, there is a bunch of capillaries. That bunch of capillaries called as the glomerulus. So this is Bowman's capsule. Both the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus constitute Malpighian body. Malpighian body. Okay, Malpighian body. PI. Okay, Malpighian body. Both glomerulus and Bowman's capsule constitute Malpighian body. Okay, first part of the nephron. Then there is a tubule. This is a tubule. From here to here, this part of the tubule is called as the PCT, proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, proximal convoluted tubule. Then a V-shaped, this is the V-shaped or U-shaped structure. You see, this is a V-shaped or U-shaped structure. This is a Henle's loop. This another part. This is a distal convoluted tubule. This is from here to here. It is a distal convoluted tubule. The last part is collecting tubule. This is the collecting tubule, CT. This is a structure of a nephron. For 3 marks or 5 marks, if the question is asked, you have to draw this figure. Draw a neat label diagram of a nephron present in the kidney. Okay? So, this is a structure. What's the role of the nephron? Actually, generally we can say, where does the urine is produced? Urine is formed in the kidneys. In kidney, where actually it is? In the nephron. So, the role of the function of the nephron is the urine formation. Right? Urine formation. That urine formation process occurs at different steps in this nephron. The first step in the urine formation is the ultrafiltration. Ultrafiltration or glomerular, one more name, glomerular filtration. Ultrafiltration or glomerular filtration. Second one is the tubular reabsorption. Tubular reabsorption. Third one is the counter current multiplier. Counter current multiplier. Last one is the tubular secretion. This tubular secretion is also called as the augmentation. These are the different steps present in the urine formation process, occurs in the nephron. Come to the first point, ultrafiltration or glomerular filtration. Here, filtration process occurs in the glomerulus. That is why it is called glomerular filtration. It is also called as the ultrafiltration because here only the ultra molecules are filtered. Only ultra molecules present in the blood will be filtered. That's why it is ultrafiltration. It occurs in the glomerulus, so it is called glomerular filtration. Right? In general, the first step occurs in the Bowman's capsule, or you can say occurs in the glomerulus, or in general it occurs in the Malpighian body. This is the Malpighian body. I drawn. Bowman's capsule, glomerulus. Actually this glomerulus is formed due to the repeated division of a blood vessel. This blood vessel is called as the afferent renal arteriole. A blood vessel enters into the cup. That blood vessel is called as the afferent renal arteriole. When it is entered into the cup, it is divided repeatedly to form a bunch of capillaries. It is called glomerulus. It is called glomerulus. Glomerulus. So this is Bowman's capsule. Both of them constitute the Malpighian body. After the formation of this glomerulus, all that branches are united to form a single blood vessel. It comes out. This is the afferent renal arteriole. Right? It gives out a branch. Actually, you have to draw that network-like structure around PCT and DCT also. I will show that later. Then, so this is the Malpighian body. Sometimes the question will be asked, draw a neat label diagram of a Malpighian body. When the question is asked, so you have to draw this. This is the Malpighian body. This is Bowman's capsule. This is glomerulus. This is ARA, afferent renal arteriole. This is ERA, afferent renal arteriole. Here actually this ultrafiltration occurs. What happens here? You see, when the blood comes to this glomerulus, a pressure is exerted. Because of that pressure, all the useful and waste ultramolecules present in that blood will be filtered from this glomerulus into this Bowman's capsule. All the useful and waste ultramolecules present in the blood will be filtered from this glomerulus into this cup. So it is called ultrafiltration or glomerular filtration. I told you in that filtrate we can see both the useful and waste products. Useful, for example, glucose, amino acid, fatty acid, like that. Some hormones, some vitamins, some ions. These are all the useful molecules, but they are filtered. Some waste, for example, urea, uric acid, etc., are also filtered. In addition to that useful and harmful waste materials, large amount of water will also be filtered in this glomerulus. Along with large amount of water, both the useful and waste ultramolecules are filtered from the glomerulus into the Bowman's capsule. This is ultrafiltration or glomerular filtration. Thus, filtered materials along with water can be called as the primary urine. It is called primary urine. Primary urine. It is not exact urine, primary urine. So, primary urine is a mixture of both useful and waste products along with water. It is formed in the glomerulus, or can say in the Bowman's capsule, or can say in general it is in the Malpighian body. And that primary urine enters into this PCT. This is the PCT, proximal convoluted tubule. Right. You see, inside this PCT, there are some hair-like structures. They are called villi. All that villi are present at the same level. That's why all that villi present on the inner side of the PCT can be called as the brush borders. Can be called as the brush borders. Can be called as the brush borders. Here on the inner side of PCT, we can see the presence of brush borders. These brush borders are nothing but the collections of the villi present at the same level, just like a bristles in the brush. Okay. Now that brush borders villi absorb all the useful materials present in the primary urine when it is entered into PCT. When the primary urine is entered into PCT, I told you that primary urine consisting of all the useful molecules. Now, all that useful molecules like glucose, amino acid, fatty acid, and some vitamins, minerals, hormones, etc. are all absorbed by that brush borders. After absorption, they release the same into the blood present in the, here is a branch. This branch actually forming a network-like structure here. Here blood is there. It is that all the useful molecules which are absorbed, reabsorbed by the brush borders will be released back into the blood present in this network-like structure. That network-like structure is called as the peritubular capillaries. Peritubular capillaries. Okay, a network-like structure, network-like blood vessels formed by a branch of ERA around this PCT, around the DCT. Okay, peritubular capillary. In that peritubular capillary, blood is there. Into that blood, all the reabsorbed useful molecules are released back into the blood. That's why this step of urine formation is called as the tubular reabsorption. So, tubular reabsorption is the second step. It occurs in PCT, during which all the useful molecules are absorbed by the brush borders, released back into the blood present in the peritubular capillaries. This is tubular reabsorption. And at this step, about 70% of water is compulsorily reabsorbed into the blood. Compulsorily. 70% of water is compulsorily reabsorbed, absorbed by brush borders and released back into the blood. Some sodium ions are also reabsorbed. Along with the sodium ions, chloride ions are also reabsorbed. So, this is tubular reabsorption. occurs in PCT. Right? The remaining urine now passed into Henle's loop, where counter current multiplier occurs. Counter current multiplier occurs. Okay? So this is the U-shaped or V-shaped structure. This is Henle's loop, right? This is the descending limb. This is the descending limb. This is the ascending limb. This is the thin point. So there are three parts in the Henle's loop. Henle, scientist name. So Henle's loop is an U-shaped or V-shaped structure of the nephron. It has three parts: descending limb, ascending limb, thin segment, thin point or thin segment. Right? While urine is passed in this descending limb, some amount of water is reabsorbed. Some amount of water is reabsorbed. Then while it is going, water is retained, some ions are reabsorbed. Here diluted urine is passed, here concentrated urine is passed. Okay, so here that urine is moving in opposite direction. You see here, in opposite direction. Here it is going downwards, here it is going upwards. Because of the opposite moving, it is called counter current. Counter current. Counter means opposite. Current means flowing. Opposite flowing. Counter current multiplier. Because of that counter current multiplier, ions are increased in the interstitial fluid present in this Henle's loop, on the outer side of the Henle's loop. You see this blood vessel forming a loop here. Here is a fluid, interstitial fluid, where that ions are released. Because of the counter current opposite flowing, there is the multiplication of ions in that fluid. So it is called counter current multiplier. Now the remainings are entered into this DCT. In this DCT, that process is the tubular secretion. Here it is a tubular reabsorption. All the useful materials are absorbed by the brush border, released back into the blood. That's why it is called reabsorption. Here, secretion, tubular secretion. Here, when the urine comes here, you see, in this case also, we can see the presence of this network-like structure. Blood is there. From that blood, all the larger waste particles like hippuric acid, etc., are secreted into DCT. That's why it is called tubular secretion. Here, all the larger useful molecules are secreted from the blood of the peritubular capillary into DCT. It is called tubular secretion. Actually, at this location, actual urine is formed. Actual urine is formed. Here also sometimes water is reabsorbed if necessary. If body needs, there is a reabsorption of water. Otherwise, there is no reabsorption of water. So ultimately, that urine is passed into this collecting tubule. Actually, I drawn the section of the kidney, renal pyramid, renal pyramid, renal pyramid. Actually, these pyramids are nothing but collections of this collecting tubule. These renal pyramids are nothing but collections of the collecting tubule. While the urine is passing, ultimately that urine, drop by drop, is dropped into this renal pelvis. From that renal pelvis, through the ureter, that urine is passed into urinary bladder. When that urinary bladder is filled, there is a signal from the brain. Because of that, there there is the excretion of that urine. So urine excretion occurs to remove the urea. Okay, so this is the brief information about the urine formation. Ultimately, that formed urine will be collected in the urinary bladder and it is excreted through the urethra as and when. So this is about the urine formation occurs in the nephron of the kidney. Okay? Right. It's enough now. Okay? Thank you.